Welcome to today's video. For day 1 of Oddtober, I am going to be covering the Candyman case of 1974. On Halloween night in 1974, a young boy named Timothy O'Brien went trick-or-treating with his dad Ronald, sister Elizabeth, and some of their family friends. They lived just outside of Houston, Texas in a town called Deer Park. Timothy was only 8 years old at the time, and like most kids, he was really excited for Halloween. He was dressed up as a character from the movie Planet of the Apes, which was really popular at this time, and he was really excited to spend his night trick-or-treating with his friends and family at neighborhood houses. The night started off pretty normal. They stopped at a few houses in the neighborhood and got some candy to start off their night, and I imagine that everyone was having a pretty good time. Things started to get a little odd when the group went to a house that didn't have any lights on, and it appeared that no one was home. I know that some people keep their lights off to try and signal to trick-or-treaters that they won't be handing out candy that night, and maybe that was what was happening, but either way, this house did not look anything like the other houses in the neighborhood that they had been to. The other houses were very clearly participating in Halloween, and this house was completely dark, but that didn't stop Timothy and his family and friends from going up to the house anyways. They knocked on the door, but after a few minutes, the kids started to get impatient, and so Timothy and his friends and his sister Elizabeth moved along while his dad Ronald stayed at the house to try and see if anyone might be home. After a few minutes, Ronald did rejoin the group, and he said that someone eventually did come to the door and gave him 5 Pixy Sticks to hand out to the children. If you're not familiar with Pixy Sticks, they're kind of like paper tubes that are filled with sugar. I kind of think that they're gross, to be honest, but a lot of kids really like them because they're really sugary and sweet. Ronald passed the Pixy Sticks out to the children. He gave one to his daughter Elizabeth, one to his son Timothy. He gave one each to their 2 friends, and then he passed the 5th one out to a little boy that he recognized from church that he saw in the neighborhood. Once everyone was home for the night, Timothy started to go through his candy like most kids do after a night of trick-or-treating. I'm sure he was really excited to go through and see everything he got, because besides eating the candy, that was usually the best part, going through your bag and seeing what you'd gotten for the night. According to Ronald, Timothy asked if he could have the Pixy Stick first, but Ronald had to help him with it because the Pixy Stick had actually been stapled shut. I feel like to most parents that would probably be a big red flag, but Ronald went ahead and gave Timothy the Pixy Stick anyways. Timothy told Ronald that the Pixy Stick didn't taste right and that it tasted bitter and not sweet like Pixy Sticks normally taste. Ronald gave Timothy a glass of Kool-Aid to wash the bad taste out of his mouth, but it wasn't long before Timothy started complaining of stomach pains. Within minutes, he was vomiting and convulsing and was just on the bathroom floor complaining that his stomach hurt and that he didn't feel right. While they waited for the ambulance to arrive, Ronald said that he sat on the bathroom floor with Timothy holding him in his arms, and it wasn't long before he felt his son's body go limp. Eventually, the ambulance did arrive, but unfortunately, Timothy O'Brien passed away en route to the hospital less than an hour after eating the Pixy Stick. Word spread pretty quickly, and the community was in complete horror. Most parents took away all of their children's Halloween candy because at this point it hadn't been revealed that it was the Pixy Stick that made Timothy sick, and so a lot of the parents weren't sure if there was just a bunch of poisoned candy going around. So a lot of them confiscated all of their children's candy and took it to the police station in order to have it evaluated and looked over by the police. It wasn't until police began to question Ronald, and after they had received the results from Timothy's autopsy, that they realized it was actually the Pixy Stick that had killed Timothy. The autopsy revealed that the Pixy Sticks had actually been laced with a very high dosage of potassium cyanide. Potassium cyanide is a salt-like substance, and it is extremely deadly and very corrosive, and this had been put into the Pixy Sticks. And since it kind of resembled sugar, no one really noticed, especially not Timothy, when he opened up the Pixy Stick until he noticed that something just didn't taste right. Luckily, the police were able to locate the 4 remaining Pixy Sticks before any of the other children consumed them, and it was actually a very close call for the little boy that Ronald recognized from church, because his parents couldn't find their Pixy Stick until they went upstairs and found their son asleep in bed holding the Pixy Stick in his hand. Since it had been stapled shut, he wasn't able to open it, and this actually saved him from experiencing the same fate that Timothy did, which is really scary to think that this little boy barely escaped being poisoned. After gathering the remaining 4 Pixy Sticks, the authorities looked them over and they found that all of the Pixy Sticks had been previously opened. Some of the sugar had been poured out and replaced with about 2 inches of cyanide. This amount of cyanide was enough to kill 3 or 4 adults, and the amount that Timothy consumed was actually enough to kill about 1 or 2 full-grown adults. So now that the police knew what killed Timothy, they needed to figure out where the children ended up getting this candy from. Ronald said that he couldn't remember which house they had gotten the Pixy Sticks from, and police found this odd because Ronald had previously told them that they had only been able to visit a couple of houses that night before it started raining, causing them to call it an early night and head home. Police figured that if they had only gone to a couple of houses, it should have been pretty easy to remember which of these houses they got the Pixy Sticks from, but Ronald claimed that he didn't know. So the police went through the neighborhood and asked a couple of the homeowners, but no one admitted to handing out Pixy Sticks that night. At this point, the police were getting pretty suspicious of Ronald, and so they asked him to walk through the neighborhood with them, hoping that it might trigger his memory about which house they had gotten the Pixy Sticks from. On the 3rd time through the neighborhood, Ronald took the police to the house that he and the children went up to on Halloween that was totally dark and appeared that no one was home. Ronald told police that he had stayed there while the other children went on to the other houses, and that eventually a man came to the door but never turned any lights on and didn't even open the door fully. He just stuck his hand out and gave him Pixy Sticks. So all that Ronald was able to see was the man's arm. Police got in touch with the man who lived there, and it was a man named Courtney Melvin, who was an air traffic controller at the airport. And Courtney claimed that he had been at work until 11 p.m. on Halloween. After interviewing more than 200 people that worked with Courtney, they all confirmed that Courtney had been at work on Halloween night. And so the police decided that Courtney had a pretty airtight alibi and that it couldn't have been him inside the house. The more that the police looked into Ronald, the more suspicious he became to them. The police learned that Ronald was actually $100,000 in debt, and he was on the brink of losing his job. Ronald had bounced around between 21 different jobs in the past decade, and his current job actually suspected him of stealing, so he was barely holding on to this job by a thread. The family home had been foreclosed on, and Ronald's car was about to be repossessed. They were in massive debt, and the financial situation was overall pretty terrible. Everything started to make sense when police learned that Ronald had actually taken out life insurance policies on the children just a few months before Timothy's death. In January of that year, Ronald had taken out a $10,000 life insurance policy on each child. A month before Timothy passed away, Ronald took out another $20,000 policy on each child. And a few days before Timothy passed away, Ronald once again took out another $20,000 life insurance policy per child, despite being advised not to by the life insurance company. The morning after Timothy died, Ronald actually called the life insurance company and asked them about how he could cash in on these policies. And things started to look even worse for Ronald when a local chemical supply company got in touch with the police and told them that Ronald had been in there recently inquiring about cyanide. Ronald went in hoping to purchase some cyanide, but actually left empty-handed when he learned that the smallest amount he could buy was a 5-pound bag. Police quickly came to the conclusion that Ronald had laced the Pixy Sticks with cyanide in an attempt to cash in the life insurance policies he had taken out against his children. And it might have looked a little too suspicious if only his children had died due to cyanide poisoning, and that's why he gave out a couple of extra sticks to the other children. This way it would look as though someone in the community was handing out poisonous candy. On November 5th, just 6 days after Timothy passed away, Ronald was arrested and he was charged with 1 count of capital murder and 4 counts of attempted murder. Despite all of the evidence against him, Ronald maintained his innocence and claimed that he was not guilty of killing his son. The trial took place 6 months after the arrest in Houston, Texas, and the evidence against Ronald was pretty damning. It became even more damning when an old acquaintance of Ronald's came forward to testify against him. The acquaintance was a chemist that Ronald had actually approached in 1973, asking him about cyanide. He asked where he could get cyanide and how much cyanide would be fatal for someone to consume. The employee from the chemical supply store also testified, and in addition, some of Ronald's family and friends took the stand to testify against him, stating that in the months leading up to Timothy's death, Ronald had become obsessed with cyanide and was always talking about it. They even mentioned that on the morning of Timothy's funeral, Ronald was talking about how much money he would be getting from the life insurance policy and how he was excited to take a vacation and buy things for himself. Timothy's mother, Diane, testified that she had no idea about these life insurance policies taken out against her children until after Timothy's death, and she also testified that on Halloween night, Timothy didn't ask Ronald if he could have the Pixy Stick, but instead Ronald coerced Timothy into eating the Pixy Stick. Despite all of these testimonies and the evidence against him, Ronald still maintained that he was innocent, and his defense claimed that there must be a mad poisoner in the community who was targeting children. It took hardly any time at all for the jury to come to their conclusion, and after only 46 minutes, they decided that Ronald was guilty of all charges. It took them another 71 minutes to determine that Ronald should be sentenced to death. Ronald was sent to prison where he would await his execution, and while he was in prison awaiting capital punishment, Ronald was endlessly harassed by the other inmates. It's pretty common knowledge that people who harm children are not treated very well in prison, and Ronald was treated especially badly when people found out that he was in there for killing his own son. Ronald did not have a single friend in prison, and he was harassed and tormented by all of the other inmates who truly despised him. Ronald's first execution date was postponed by his attorney, and the second one ended up being postponed as well. A third execution date was set for the 8th anniversary of Timothy's murder, but Ronald's attorney managed to get this date postponed as well. A fourth and final execution date was set for March 31st, 1984, and of course, Ronald's attorney tried to get this date postponed, but it didn't work this time, and Ronald was finally sentenced to death for murdering his son Timothy. Ronald was executed by lethal injection, and even in his final moments, he still claimed that he was innocent and was not the one that murdered his son. Ronald's final statement was, "I forgive all, and I do mean all, who have contributed to my death. God bless you, and may God's best blessings be yours." More than 300 people celebrated outside of the prison, and they were throwing candy in the air. Someone was reported to be screaming "trick or treat" when Ronald was injected, and Ronald was buried separately from Timothy in a totally different cemetery. Diane went on to remarry, and the man that she married actually ended up adopting Elizabeth. I don't have much information about what their life was like after this, but I imagine after such traumatic and intense events, it was a challenge for them. It's a very sad story, and I feel very badly for Timothy. It's disgusting that someone could do this to their own child, and it's likely that he would have done it to Elizabeth as well. But at the end of the day, I am glad that Timothy received some form of justice and that Elizabeth was able to go on and live a long, happy life without her father around. That's it for today's video, and I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up so that I know what kind of content you want to see from me. While you're at it, if you wanted to subscribe, it would really help out my channel. You can leave a comment below telling me what your favorite Halloween candy is. My favorite are Reese's peanut butter cups, especially the pumpkin ones, because they tend to just hit different. I'll see you on Sunday for the second day of Oddtober, and if you want, you can turn on post notifications to be notified when I upload that video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.